Welcome to Unfamiliar Territory, an anime podcast hosted by two white dudes who've been friends for over 15 years. We talk about the history and influence of anime, as well as review anime new and old, believe in the stars, and sail away for the future into unfamiliar territory.
My name is Grant.
And I'm Brantley. Heads up, spoilers on the way. Check the description, see if you're safe to listen. Hey kids, you ready for a leftism? Here we go! Grant, I'd like to start us off with a quote from The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction by Walter Benjamin, 1935. This is from page 19 in the epilogue section. Quote.
I wait real quick.
Yeah.
I already am like this might be your wildest opening.
Okay. Quote. The growing proletarianization of modern man and the increasing formation of masses are two aspects of the same process. Fascism attempts to organize the newly created proletarian masses without affecting the property structure which the masses strive to eliminate. Fascism sees its salvation in giving these masses not their right, but instead a chance to express themselves. The masses have a right to change property relations. Fascism seeks to give them an expression while preserving property. The logical result of fascism is the introduction of aesthetics into political life. Grant, I have two questions for you.
Yeah, what's up?
Okay, question number one. What's Tokyo Mew Mew News' score on my anime list?
Alright. Tokyo Mew Mew News score on my anime list is a 6.6.
Okay, now what is Yurei Deco's score? That's question two.
It is a 6.06.
The world is bullshit, Grant.
I do want to point out that you reading essentially like communist theory right off the bat does quite possibly make us the most pretentious anime podcast that is out there. It's Yurei Deco, a leftist anime, kind of. It tries to be, and it doesn't hit it super well. That being said, I don't think this show is a 6.06.
Yeah, that's not the reason why the show didn't get rated well.
I feel like I also don't think that Yurei Deco really deserves to be a 6.06. Mm-hmm. I think that I could understand it being like a hard 7, maybe like a 6.8. I find, and I wonder if it's one of those shows that just has a lot of people putting it at a 6. Not like a 1s and a 10s, just, yeah, the show's all right. Mm-hmm. and it just kind of averaged out about that. I wish you could see that information, actually.
Yeah, I at least got that impression. Like, early reviews were also about this amount, so it wasn't a case where it's like, oh, it had high scores and then dropped off or something like that. I remember looking at a couple of comments early on. They're kind of like, yeah, when's this show gonna pop off? When's it, gonna get good? Blah blah blah. And I think you and I both felt it was good to start. In fact, like great to start. So it was kind of disappointing to see that was like the popular discourse on the show. But we are gonna get into that. I comparing reviews here. Our last one we did, Tokyo Mew Mew New. I feel like if that was like a bender, then this one is like we're waking up depressed.
Our hangover?
Yeah, the day after. Yeah, and now we're yearning, right? It's like, God, I want him back.
This might be one of the least popular shows we've ever done an episode on in terms of people who have watched it. Yeah. There's definitely shows out there that are probably less popular, but there's not like a cult status like Symphogear has or Reivu Starlight has with Yurei Deco. It came out in the summer of 2022, so it's not super old. And right now on my anime list, it is sitting at 5,903 user reviews, which is not particularly high. Mm-hmm. So Yurei Deco is a anime made by Science Saru, the studio Science Saru. Their big claim to fame is Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken. They did Devilman Crybaby. They had an episode of Star Wars Visions. But honestly, compared to some of the other stuff, Science Saru is pretty non-committal as an animation studio. They came in. They've only been in the game since 2013, so they have 17 shows. So that's pretty small compared to some other studios we've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think also part of their staff had worked on Ping Pong the animation.
Yes.
And then some other, like...
Space Dandy. Space Dandy.
Oh, Space Dandy.
Space Dandy was one. They weren't the ones that were, like, they weren't the main studio there, but they've helped with some pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
And they do kind of have an interesting animation style that I think is pretty consistent. I've watched some of their trailers, and it has that kind of softer lines on the outside with a little bit more flowy animation. I think Yurei Deco is a gorgeous anime.
Me too.
It's like right off the bat, the colors are interesting, the characters are fun. You have a lot of fun backgrounds, and the cast is well developed in terms of like style. I liked Yurei Deco from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and clearly aesthetic is an important part of the point they're trying to make. So I think it's good that they nailed it. I don't think many people are in the same boat as us here. I don't know that people found the aesthetic particularly impressive or eye-catching, which is unfortunate. It might be, if they're not getting that same flash right, then I wonder if people kind of like, oh, this isn't that, you know. But I really feel like the art style fits, and again, just kind of weirds me out that it didn't, like, have a bigger splash than it did. Unfortunate.
I do remember the reason I got into this specific show is I was on our anime of all places, mm-hmm. and someone was explaining how they thought it was weird that our anime really liked Decadence, which is another leftist adjacent media.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't like Yurei Deco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both shows have like this. You know, you have like the real world and the digital world, and you know, there's tension across that, and we're dealing with things like, you know, like a lens on economics and like topics like, you know, homelessness and poverty, and you know, the difficulty in climbing out of those when you're in the oppressed class, and the fact that one got, you know, so well like acclaimed and the other kind of flew under the radar, it's unfortunate. Again, maybe the subtler aesthetic and lower energy, like of like, say, the action scenes and stuff, perhaps that was part of it. But anyways, what is here, like, you know, on the surface and beneath that surface, I think we both really dug. But just to get like the art topic kind of wrapped up with a bow too, the music's nice as well. This is performed by Mito, at least in part, and we know Mito, I believe, from Wonder Egg Priority, which we also really loved. Mito had worked on that. I think Dede Mouse worked on that in this.
Yeah, Dede Mouse did the theme song, the opening song.
Yeah, and so
it's like 8 quadrillion lovers, or like septillion love or something. Dede Mouse had a little bit more of a hand in the Wonder Egg Priority music. He did the entirety soundtrack of that, but Mito was also very, very good.
I think this show has given me an increased fondness for Mito's music. It's it's bouncy, it's succinct, you know, it feels enough like digital music, you know, quote unquote, without feeling like it's bland or like predictable. It's kind of the nice, like, light tangy whipped topping on the show, and it's, you know, really like fun cartoon style. But yeah, beyond the art, I think we have to dive deeper into what we really, really like about the show, and also in places where it disappoints us. So, where would you like to start in terms of, like, reviewing this thing?
Let's kind of just go over... I don't think we need to do a full plot synopsis necessarily, because there's a lot of episodic kind of stuff that happens here. Mm-hmm. But I think kind of going over, like, what happens and how it kind of comes to be would be important. So, Yurei Deco takes place in the far future, in the undisclosed future.
Yeah.
Where augmented reality is part of everyone's life, and their currency and their wealth is tied to how many likes they get. It's very influencer culture inspired, like, economy. But one of the things I do like about Yurei Deco is it doesn't outright say that, like, having this interconnected internet is a negative thing. Mm-hmm. There's definitely some problems that they talk about, but it's never a internet is bad. You are bad for enjoying it. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was a really refreshing take on it.
Yeah.
That being said, it is pretty anti-capitalist at times. The show starts out with our main character, Barry, having her Deco, which is their augmented reality device, fucking up. And as she goes to get it fixed, she runs into a person named Hack. And because her Deco is broken, she's able to see Hack, which allows them to become friends. And there is a event going on where a glitch can happen that steals all of your currency, which is love, which are your likes, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so Barry is part of this after-school detective club with her friends, and they are making their task to track down Phantom Zero. And during this time, the police believe that Hack is what is causing Phantom Zero, but Hack is also looking for Phantom Zero. Now, Hack does steal money from people quite often, but not in the same way that Phantom Zero does. So Hack is arrested, and Barry goes through this long, complicated process in saving Hack, and doing so she meets the rest of the Yurei Detective Club, which is Finn, who is a tall, gentlefolk who cannot use decos because they make them sick. There's Hank, who is a salvager who has a boat, and he's kind of the chill, engineering, MacGyver-esque kind of person. Mm-hmm. There's Madame 44, who is a elderly woman who works through the detective club using a drone, and she's sort of their information broker. There's Smiley, which is Madame 44's granddaughter, and she sort of acts as Madame 44's handler. And there's Mr. Watson, who I fucking love. He is a man in a suit and a giant cat mask. He does not talk. And he just kind of hangs out. He's great. I love him. So Barry tries to save Hack, and in doing so, the government tries to kill Hack by blowing them up in a train explosion. Hack and Barry escape, but now everyone thinks Barry is dead, thus making Barry a Yurei, or someone who is vanished from the AR. Mm-hmm. So during most of the episodes, it's a mystery of the week episode where there is something going on, and the team has to find them. Usually, one of the characters will get a little bit more focus than the other characters. Mm-hmm. But it's entertaining. And then there's a overarching plot on who Phantom Zero is and what they want, and also with the moon that orbits this planet that they're on seems to have a giant city, and the moon is called Mark Twain. There's a lot of references to Mark Twain's work, and I never really got why.
Yeah, that's one thing I kind of wish I paid more attention to. And by the way, it's been a long time since we had watched this. So there's going to be some things here and there that we're a little spotty on. But safe to say, in this review, we're not going to dig into the Mark Twain stuff a lot. I feel like,
I do know that Mark Twain is kind of a like classical liberal. Like he was very supportive of technological processes, and he didn't like welfare. So very, very classic liberal. He was very much about that business aged, and he loved the free market. So I suppose, but he also wasn't particularly fond of like racism or the social side of it. So I think defining him as a liberal is a pretty good thing. Although he was an imperialist at times. Either way, they love Mark Twain. They use a lot of his stuff.
Yeah, I think that what you just described, like his classic liberalism, I think is calcified well into the setting, and also unpacked to an extent. Not as much as I wish, but I think we'll say that a lot in this review. But yeah, safe to say, like the sort of the technocracy of Mark Twain, is sort of the backdrop for all of these more granular problems that we're seeing here. So, we don't really get any kind of like racism allegory. If anything, only slightly in like dealing with, there's an AI character, for example, that is spotlit for an episode, but just kind of at the end of it, and then we're kind of shuffled along from there. And outside of that, any other AI are mainly like drones and things, or it's someone, controlling something deliberately. And so that aspect, doesn't really carry in. But the sense that like, hey, here's this technological city, it's, like, go strike out your own kind of, that definitely like ties in, so yeah, that's that.
Yeah, totally. You got it. There's probably more that you can do deep reading on, but we're not going to talk too much about that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the characters and our feelings on them.
Yes. Okay. As an overview into our character section here, something Grant and I found interesting about this show is that, there are quite a few characters that aren't given gendered pronouns in the Crunchyroll English dub for like long stretches of time. Like for example, Hack, like what I think it took like till the late end of the show before Hack was ever called she,
Yeah, yes. It was like anytime that anyone would refer to Hack, it would be like
Hack is Hack. Right.
Hack is Hack, or that weird kid.
Yeah.
Which and like, but we figure out that she is she, but in the end, Hack is also Hack, which is a pretty good, way to kind of do a at least non-traditional presenting gendered person.
Yeah, it has these the progressiveness of this show, I think, is weaved into it as opposed to being like editorially stated, right? In some ways, I feel like the way this show presents its story, it feels like it's like this is your primary source news reporting, almost. There aren't that many times where the show will outright make a comment on something. And the characters don't do it a whole lot either, because they're just so entrenched in the world, right? Instead, they'll just kind of go about their business, and what you can glean, like, yes, this situation is meant to be, messed up. The fact that, Barry gets lost off the grid, and like she and Hack were, basically tried to be politically assassinated. It's like, wow, okay, there, that speaks for itself. But you also don't get just a lot of cases where someone is being like, this is unjust, or that kind of thing. Not until like the late part of the show.
And even then it falls really flat. One of the things I think this show does is it sets up these characters to have motivations, and it sets them up to have like really good like fuck the system energy. But we don't really see it, and nothing really changes.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get to that after I think we do our characters. So let's talk about our characters a little bit. Let's talk about Barry.
Mm-hmm.
Barry.
Barry is great.
The main character. She's got red hair, and she's kind of a goofball. I really like the way they do her. She's very competent, which is nice. And like I think there's this kind of usual trope where new character is getting used to new technology and new ways of looking at it, and they're shy, but Barry's really like forward about it. I think the moment I thought that, I was like, oh, I fucking love Barry, is when she pretended to be Hack's lawyer, and there was just no like doubt in her mind that it was gonna work.
No hesitation. Yeah,
she's got a good design. I like her outfit. Most of this, like I said, this show has some pretty good visuals. I do think that she kind of falls to the back later. I find it weird. So when Barry is pronounced dead, her parents are like, her daughter's dead. Super duper sad. But Barry doesn't really like care. She has like one moment where she sees them and she realizes that they have been like looking for her, like off the clock. Which is really neat because they're like content monitors for the AR reality stuff. But she doesn't really do anything to like even remotely confirm that she's okay. I thought that was a little weird.
Yeah. I agree. I feel like she has a really strong start, and then as they need to introduce the rest of the characters, like the Yurei that we're getting to know, she becomes more of a spectator. And not that she's not involved, like she's almost always still in the lens of the show as we're like moving forward. But sometimes she's just kind of like learning and participating, or the things she's involved in kind of just end up looping back to where they were in the first place. And so it can feel like in those cases her active nature is maybe not being played up to its fullest extent. But she does voice her opinions on a lot of things. If there is someone in this show who is vocal about, like, whoever is the mouthpiece of the show, I think it's Barry. And then Hack as well, but I think Hack is a little more self-defined, away from like the moral compass of like the show's writing. I really love that Barry is radicalized not on like anger or fear or reactionary spite. Like she feels those things at times, but the reason why she ends up aligning with the Yurei and starting like a new life with them is that like she's curious and she's open-minded, and like she just kind of loves life, right?
Yeah.
Like she's trying to track down Finn earlier in the show and get involved with Hack because like she sees people who are doing things, direct action, right? At the start she's just kind of fumbling around with their friends, but she kind of just drops them in a heartbeat, right? Like she doesn't really look back. Like she steps away from home, and really has to flee home. She leaves like all of her material possessions and everything behind her, because that stuff doesn't matter to her all that much. She's been craving action, and finally here's her people, right? It's such a wonderful concept for a character for this kind of show. It's exactly, I think, what this show needs. Which I guess is why I'm always a little bit bummed when they put her on the bench a bit. It's just that I enjoy her as a character so much when she does get like front and center.
Right.
You know, it just, yeah, the fact that she becomes more than she was without becoming less of herself, right? Barry developing as a character just gives you more Barry, as opposed to, like, I don't know, like, toning her down, or, you know, making her mature, quote unquote, you know, and just like having her like centralize or become moderate or something, you know. Yeah, Barry is excellent. Do you want to talk about Hack next?
Yeah, let's talk about Hack. Hack is a fucking gremlin.
Hack's a delight.
I love Hack. I like that she has a lot of those wild phrases that consistently keep getting brought up.
Nerdy
I think
birdie.
They're translated.
Yeah,
like nerdy birdie, and she rhymes a lot of things. And it makes her character very entertaining. I like that when she was arrested, they thought that she was trying to be hard by doing a silent treatment, but she was just asleep. This show does not take itself seriously at times, and sometimes it's good, and sometimes I think it kind of misses the mark with that. Hack is also driven by curiosity, but she's also driven by like the idea that, hey, if these people are going to challenge me, I'm going to kick their ass, which is why she wants to find Phantom Zero, because she doesn't know how to beat Phantom Zero.
Yeah.
She also uses a lot of like analog technology that most people don't use anymore, and I'm always a sucker for that kind of stuff. Very, very 90s cyber hacker kind of style. Her deco that she uses to see the augmented reality is like these big ass goggles. It's pretty damn good.
Yeah, she's got that. She's like the anarchic spirit, I think, that kicks Barry into gear. And then that's represented in, like, you know, she's not using standard equipment. She's, you know, hacking together things that, you know, are older technology, but probably not nearly as, you know, monitored and surveilled, right? The fact that, you know, she's so good at keeping off the grid. This also extends to characters like Hank, who, you know, we'll talk about too. Yeah, like, everything I think you need to know about the spirit of the Yurei in this show. I feel like Hack is like the exact burst of information you need. I love that she and Barry are allowed to be foils without it ever feeling like they're gonna get into melodrama, right? They have their fights every now and then, but it never feels like the show is going to drag as a result, which is nice. As you mentioned, it's like a lighthearted show. It's cartoony, and I think that benefits it. For the people at least who aren't super into, you know, politically analyzing what's going on and drawing meaning from it beyond just what the text of the show says, you at least are going to have some very fun characters who are comprising like most of the action, right? Yeah, I think Barry and Hack are on the two sides of the handcart that is essentially driving the show forward, right? Yeah, they're pushing and pulling basically on each other, and that's, you know, up and down and up and down. That's causing them to move.
Yeah, they're fun. The rest of the team is really good. So Finn is interesting. I think he kind of serves as the...
Finn is another tone setter for the group.
Yeah, Finn's the only character that gets a backstory episode.
I guess that is like Madame 44 kind of does, but only by way of like someone she knew, right?
Right. We see what happened with Finn.
Yes.
And Finn lived in this shit area with like a ton of pollution, and it was essentially the town of Tom Sawyer was this paradise, but if you did not have enough love, you kind of went under this bridge where there was a bunch of garbage and pollution, and you couldn't get love for it.
Yeah, it just
so you couldn't make
spiral.
your money.
Yeah.
Which is neat, which is a really cool motivation. And so Finn uses their ability to create these worlds in cyberspace, and that is how they get into computers and how they can figure out things, and even though he can't use Decos, he's able to sort of craft the world that other people using Decos can. And he wants to overthrow the system because he believes that it is unjust. And it makes a ton of sense because it clearly is unjust.
Mm-hmm.
He goes back, one of the big defining episodes is when Finn goes back to his hometown area and everyone's kind of pissed at him for leaving. And they
basically they band together to fix, the problem that started Finn on this path in the first place.
Right.
Not without a bunch of tension to unwind first, but just this return for vengeance / retribution.
And there's kind of this question on whether or not Finn is Phantom Zero, and it adds to this mystery, and it doesn't go anywhere, and I think that's kind of a big bummer.
Mm-hmm.
Finn immediately going from being like suspect number 1 to nobody is kind of a problem. For me, at least. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a little...
Yeah. But I will say, at the very least, I am glad that they took that... the suspicion subplot of, hey, what's Finn spending time on? What are his concerns and stuff? They did convert that momentum directly into the backstory and then the payoff of going and, them getting together and fixing stuff. The whole, you should have told us what you're dealing with, now we can work on it together thing might feel a little bit played out.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that, that Finn's, return and then, resolution there is kind of the explosion that people might have been looking for in the earlier part of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm not quite as let down by Finn's character resolve, I think, than some folks might be. I think Finn's handled well. And there are I feel like on a rewatch especially, there's gotta be just lots laden in there that you can sort of, pick at and see what's deeper woven into Finn as a character. I know Finn is another character who is referred to pretty ambiguously throughout the main thrust of the show, and in flashbacks of Finn, and references to Finn, sort of visualizing that, it's very difficult to determine what Finn's gender identity might be. Who knows if Finn is a trans man, or just happened to wear gender non-conforming clothing, or maybe that's something we think it is because Americentrically speaking, that clothing more traditionally just looks like that to us. I don't know, but the fact that we get to think about it and deliberate on it is interesting, and it's once again part of this show laying things out and sort of sewing them into the fabric of the show for you to investigate rather than just kind of laying it all out, right? I would have hoped that it would have created more discussion around the show, but that did not happen. But yeah, I think that Finn is another really strong part of the cast. And at the very least, Finn being kind of this person who you can tell has radical intentions but is also really trying to meter out how they go about that is interesting. When Hack and Barry are very go, and Finn meanwhile is trying to work more subversively and in a clandestine sort of way, there is some tension there that I feel works.
Clandestine.
Clandestine. There's your word for the day.
Another fucking tick off the most pretentious anime podcast.
Oh, come on. That's like a little more complex than a simple 6-word. I guarantee I got that word off of a spelling test in like middle school or high school or something. Anyways, I like Finn a lot.
I like Finn too.
Okay, who's next to discuss?
Hank and Watson. They're interesting. They're fun. It's fun to see Hank fuck around with technology and get it to work. I always love that kind of character. Mm-hmm. Like the junk collector who is like, yes, this is a radio from the 1914s, and if you remove this part and this part, you can actually make a receiver that allows us to communicate with the Eagles. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean anything. It's just a bunch of techno babble. He doesn't really have much of a character arc.
Yeah.
Besides just being good at his job.
Mm-hmm. He has kind of a utilitarian purpose in the plot, which is not a bad thing. If we had too many characters fighting for the spotlight, then that, could certainly be an issue in a show of this length. But yeah, he's very much kind of a character who is meant to provide light dissent in humor, as people kind of bug him to do stuff. But at the very least, it's very fun to see like what he comes up with, things he invents and hacks together, and the analog methodology of that. It's just fun. Hank's a fun character.
Yes. And same with Watson. Watson's character is shrouded in a bunch of mystery, and you just don't even get an answer. Mm-hmm. Watson is very into the episode with Watson is probably my favorite episode. It has to do with this hidden ramen place that isn't on a map, and they essentially are trying to find it through the entire time, and they do, and they find out it's made by a robot who can't taste ramen, but he's from Mark Twain. He's from the moon, and he was created for essentially to be a librarian of knowledge, but he found it more fascinating to see how humans interact over food, and I thought that was so fun. And once again, I find it a little frustrating that we get this kind of hint of this big AI secrecy thing that's going on. But they don't do anything. Mm-hmm. It just kind of after that episode, it kind of goes off of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like there's got to be so much left unsaid, kind of cutting room floor kind of stuff. It makes me wonder, like, if they had intended for this to be a 12-episode show and just did the best they could, and felt like there's stuff that they really couldn't remove, but just had to set it up very lightly or what. But it is unfortunate because the little tastes of these these nuggets of information are delicious. But you just get the taste. Sample platter, basically.
Yep.
Yeah, it would probably be great for a fanfiction community if that exists out there, but
if the show had fans.
Yeah, that's step one. Also, Watson has flashlight eyes.
And also runs like a cat sometimes.
Yeah, just again, the fact that this show is cartoony serves it so well, because you get little surprises like that, right? Like, oh, here's Madame 44 and her drone, and it's surprisingly mobile, right? That she's got like a transforming bed, for example. Just like these fun little subversions that they get to work in there. Smiley takes off her gas mask, and she actually is just really Smiley underneath it. The show is peppered with those little surprise moments. It's like, oh, that's nice, that's funny, that's cute. It is a delightful show. Even though some of my favorite parts of it are the heavier subject matter aspects. It's goofy, it's silly, it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Madame 44 and Smiley.
Yeah.
Madame 44 also gets a little bit more backstory. She's old, and so she's kind of grown up as Tom Sawyer's grown up. And one of the potential Phantom Zero candidates is someone that she worked with a long time ago, who was kind of like a lost love. And she believes he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, maybe he's alive because this drone is looking for him. And it's a good episode. It's cute. I'm a big fan of the whole older folks looking to try and reconnect with someone they might have lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's another one of those cases where the show has this like subtle sadness to it. Yeah, Madame 44, I feel like might be an underappreciated character. She's kind of utilitarian in the sense that she'll kind of just plop in information where it's helpful. But again, I think she's a nice addition to the cast. I
honestly feel like there's a lot of shows where I think there were too many episodes. I feel like Yurei Deco acted as if it had 24 episodes, and then it didn't.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, oh, maybe it's this guy, maybe it's this guy. We have one more episode to go. And I feel like having more time to get to know Madame 44 and her skills, and get to know how she interacts with Smiley a little bit better. I do like that Smiley, being the granddaughter of Madame 44, they do have a cute relationship, and that's fun to see.
Yeah.
But you don't get to see it too much. Everyone gets their episode, everyone gets their time to shine. You get a little hint into their backstory, and then we gotta move on. We gotta keep going. And some episodes take a long time to get going, and then some don't.
Yeah. There's a lot that's implied, but that's about as far as we get on some of these. But at the very least, their interactions are fun, right? Smiley is a little more of a, how would you describe Smiley, Grant?
Smiley is kind of like a
firecracker a little bit. No.
Yeah, she doesn't really start shit. She just kind of comments on it and is like, that's a little funny.
Yeah,
you know,
a nice little touch of snark to the show.
Yeah.
And I think that I would agree with you that where like Smiley was fun for that, I think having her get a dedicated episode with Madame 44, officially like, bumped her up a notch, right? Like,
yeah. And I think one of the things is that because the show is told through the lens of Barry, you don't get an episode where Barry isn't part of it. And I feel like there could have been times where that could have been the case, where you could have had a Madame 44 and Smiley episode with Smiley leading the charge and not Barry being a part of it. Sometimes I felt that Barry wasn't particularly necessary, and I like Barry. I like when she's there. But once again, I feel like because of the short amount of times this show was given, you couldn't get stuff like that.
Yeah. Since we like Barry, we want Barry to not just be sort of this, like, auxiliary part of the cast. You'd want her to be there because she has something to contribute. And so when she's just having to sort of sideline along with someone else's major going-ons, then you kind of wish you could just have one or the other, right? Like either let Barry be the main instigator of this, or let Barry sit this one out entirely so we can get to the meat of what these characters are about and how they're going through stuff. Let them take the full stage instead of sharing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the ending of this show, because I feel like that's a really big contingency that people have for this show in particular.
Oh yeah.
So as we kind of talked about, there's all of these theories of who is Phantom Zero and what their purpose is, and that's kind of the the underlying thing that is happening with the Yurei Detective Club, and everything kind of starts pointing that if you want to figure out who Phantom Zero is, you have to go to Mark Twain, you have to go to the moon. And so you have all these possible people that we have thought could be Phantom Zero, but have been confirmed not to be. And so you go to the moon, and you're getting ready, and the person who is Phantom Zero is a totally new character, which is a huge disappointment. At least to me it is. I like mysteries being able to be solved. Like, Odd Taxi, for instance. Mm-hmm. I solved the shit out of Odd Taxi. And it felt really good to do so. Mm-hmm. And I kept trying to figure out what was going on here, what the purpose of it was, and you couldn't. There's just no possible way. Mm-hmm. And so you go through this entire show realizing that the town of Tom Sawyer is kind of a miserable place to live outside of the superficialness of the AR stuff. Mm-hmm. There's no actual designs on the buildings. Everything is designed through AR, and you get to skin the city however you want, which could look cool, but because not everyone has access to that stuff, most people just see a blank wall with some advertisements.
Yeah, you get brutalist architecture, and that's about it.
And you figure out that all of Tom Sawyer was a test by this woman to try and determine who should lead it into the next great age. And it turns out it's Hack. And so Hack becomes the de facto leader of Tom Sawyer, goes into hiding, and basically changes nothing. Mm-hmm. You get a couple things that are added. Like, for instance, one of the reasons that nobody knows where Barry went is because the government censored her death. And you find out that the government looks through the different things that people see through their decos to figure out what needs to be put out into the public and what doesn't. Mm-hmm. And Hack goes and changes it so that none of that happens. There is no censorship. Everyone has to figure out what it is on their own, which in paper is fine, but also doesn't really talk about the security state that's been pushed for Tom Sawyer.
Right.
You have Finn's little town that has been plagued by pollution and littering and all this trash, and the way they solve it is that if you clean up the trash, you get love, you get money. So they basically made it like a jobs program, which is, once again, fine, but also you're not systemically looking at the reason why this town has become so polluted. Mm-hmm. And everyone in the Deco Club, or the Yurei Detective Club, kind of goes back to doing what they want to do and having a good old time, and it's mostly fine. But it's kind of a really rushed ending.
Yes.
It feels like there was so much stuff that needed to be said about this world, and almost nothing changes systemically.
Mm-hmm. Yep. In like the most favorable way, I guess one could say that this show is not about, like, you know, what could happen in a utopian sort of result of the world. Maybe it's more about what currently we might be able to do with one little step forward, but that's also not very inspiring for you know, a cartoon show that up to this point has mostly been you know, very willing to cast light on societal problems, right? Like, if you're looking for it, then you can see just like, yeah, like they have very straightforward up and down depictions of, like, you know, fascist methods of, you know, economic and governmental control, the surveillance state, you know, just how fucked up that is. The fact that every person is a security camera and doesn't know it, right? Like, that's messed up. The show doesn't have to commentate on these things, hopefully, for you to realize that they're messed up. And so it gets to save itself some time on that. But when it comes to the end, you're like, all right, what's the answers? What are the characters going to do about it? For Hack to not is weird. It doesn't seem like what Hack would do. You know, normally Hack is the kind of person that gets in over her head because she tries to do so much, right?
And we do see before this, we see a glimpse into what possibly could have been Hack's backstory, where when she was a little girl and she was being protected by the world and she didn't have anybody that she could go and hang out with because her parents were basically keeping her in the house. Mm-hmm. But we're never confirmed if that's real or not, because it's a trick used to keep Hack from completing the final test of Tom Sawyer, essentially. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so the fact that, you know, she goes through all of this, right? She's fighting uphill. For her to get to this point and then to not work on the systemic parts of this, or even to let the people sort of restructure things, right? And say, hey, I'm not the boss of this, we're all the bosses of this, something like that. The fact that that doesn't happen feels kind of callous for Hack as a character, right? The fact that she's kind of been, so well integrated into the group so far, and then would just at the end be like, no, I'm just gonna sit up here on my own and watch things and, have all this data and whatever. And it's not depicted as like sort of an unsettling thing either. It's not like a heel turn for Hack, not in the way that it's visualized and sort of like cinematically played out. It's just meant to be like, yeah, we did it, hooray, we solved a few things.
The way I look at it, and I was reading some of the discussions from that episode recently, in preparation for this, and people talked about how it reminded them of the Wonder Egg Priority Street finale.
Yeah.
Right? Where you have this kind of weird out of nowhere change. However, I think because Wonder Egg Priority lends itself to odd shit in a way, there's some things in Wonder Egg Priority where you can speculate.
There's unreality involved, yeah.
And you can figure out what's real and what's not. And I really liked that about the ending. I think the ending to Wonder Egg Priority is decent if you go in with a speculative understanding of what it actually might be. But the thing is that Yurei Deco has an ending. It's done. Mm-hmm. And it told you it's okay. And I'm not a big fan of it.
Yeah. Like, I think Grant and I wanted something more confrontational. Maybe, like, again, trying to reparatively read from this, maybe they're trying to say, like, hey, here's a fictional society that is ready to take care of itself, like, and you don't need Hack to be the one to pull the trigger on it, right? Like, okay, quote, the destructiveness of war furnishes proof that society has not been mature enough to incorporate technology as its organ, that technology has not been sufficiently developed to cope with the elemental forces of society, unquote. Like, and of course, this is 1935, right? So we are charged up with World War II and all of that. The point being made there that, like, we're having new technological age, things can be easily reproduced, the people are given aesthetic as sort of this pacifier, while meanwhile there's perhaps an aesthetic in war that needs to be agreed is moving, and ultimately, like, one, like, shows, like, yeah, we weren't ready for this and now the consequences need to happen. And also that, like, art is political, right? And that there's an aura in art that is immutable. Some of this I do and don't just, agree with. So, again, to bring it back to Yurei Deco, maybe they're trying to say, hey, we aren't getting a war, we aren't getting, like, a revolution, because we are finally mature enough to, handle this, right? But it doesn't seem like the changes they've made are all that great, right? Like, it's a short step for, say the Yurei of the population, who are still, like, going to have to be their own upbringers in society, right? Like, they still have to work their way out of the damage that other people have wrought on them. And so, like, it's just that revolution or that change is happening slowly and steadily, incrementally. And still the onus is on the oppressed to unoppress themselves. Which sucks. It sucks. Exchanging an authoritarian sort of anarcho-capitalist ruler with a constructivist anarchist ruler didn't end up, causing that riot of circumstance, right? Like, hey, this is fucked up, let's change it. Instead, it gets written off as Hack saying, hey, people are resilient enough to take these circumstances and make something of it. Like, Hack is super against the behaviorist idea that, like, people are just a product of their environments, like Joe kind of is profusing here. But, everything that, would engineer that kind of environment then is just left there. Hack's thesis is like, people aren't just, products of their environment, so I don't have to worry about the environment. We'll just, make a few patches to how society works, and then everyone will just kind of get to a better place. And I don't think that's, at least in modern society, I don't think that at all has proven true.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the show starts out as a scathing like critique on like neoliberalism and policies, and it ends with the way to do it is more neoliberalism policies under a different person who's a little less neoliberal.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay,
yeah,
sure.
It's the, like, and there's some really easy ones too, I feel like, I mean, okay, Hack at the beginning of the show is exploiting people's visible love counters to, like, steal love from them, right? And so, like, that's obviously a problem. The fact that you can tell, like, what class someone is a part of by seeing their love counter, that's an issue. It makes people vulnerable. If they really are interested in this, like, diffusing the tension of society, then they probably should have hidden those numbers so that, people don't go for each other's throats. But that's not something that happens. Love is still centrally how people, economically function. And so all the problems tied with it are still there. The change to do moderation from, like, true and false to good and bad, I get the impression that the idea there is that true and false is still a part of it, but then also it's like, do we allow this to be around, or do we not want it to be around?
Right.
I feel like at best it's like Snopesifying the world, and at worst it's a shrug towards fake news, which is pretty horrid considering that Barry and Hack were victims of false information and then subsequently assassination attempt, right? Like, it feels like what Barry and Hack went through to get to this point doesn't contribute to the decisions that Hack makes in the end. And of course, I don't think that Hack should be, like, the one and only ruler of all this in the end anyways, but if someone was going to make some decisions, I would have expected more out of Hack. It seems out of character.
Yep. I agree. Overall, though, I think Yurei Deco is worth the check out. I think it is fun. It is unique. It might not be the scathing anti-capitalist show that you want to watch, but you'll have a good time.
Yeah. There's, again, I still think if you're someone who likes to take an active part of your media, you're still going to find a lot out of this, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And because the show doesn't sort of hold your hand or pat you on the back for, like, hey, did you notice that was a bad? Did you think that was bad? Well, congrats, we think so too. There's not a lot of that's explicit, right? Even, like, when characters will have these discussions, there's usually someone who kind of takes the opposite side of things. Someone will sort of bring the moderate opinion back down on it. And so you as a viewer have to really kind of stick up for yourself and take a stance on it. And I like that. I do think that there's a lot of subtlety in this show that's well handled. The whole separation of Barry from her family and the moments where she's, like, kind of looking over their shoulder as they're coping with losing her, and them, believing, like, hey, she's still out there, we can maybe find her. Like, that shit hits hard. I don't find that in a lot of other media, and, like, maybe I just don't watch enough media, I don't know, but, like,
of course you don't.
It's good. There's, I think it's episode 10, Barry has this slow cry, and it just tore me apart. This is a really well-produced show. I feel like the people who made it really understand this stuff. This stuff does not happen by accident. But damn it. I don't know. Let me think here. I want to look through and see if there's other things I haven't mentioned yet that I want to at least applaud for the show, maybe to convince someone to go watch it. Again, I think there's like progressive elements that are loaded in here that are well for this, like for example, we have a character episode. There's a character, Mr. Mitsumame, and the episode is about recovering his avatar. And so it turns out his avatar is like a cute girl, so it's like, oh, okay, here's like kind of one little glance at transgenderism in this world. Neat, I'm glad that exists here, and I do think that contributes to how this world is fleshed out, right? They don't undercut it with some kind of joke. They don't like, oh, that's gross or anything like that, right? It's well handled. It's mature. Other things, you mentioned the court case earlier. The fact that everything is like, going out of control, and then Phantom Zero interferes and causes the the prosecutor to freak out, and then it turns out, oh, the prosecutor was an AI. Happens in a second, right? And then it's boom, it's a very minor part of an episode that has a huge impact. And these episodes are decked with stuff like this. They're decoed with stuff like this. Fuck, never mind.
There it is. There it is.
I do think it's really interesting that we have. I know someone who describes like American fascism as like we've gone like a pedestrian descent into it. Like where it wasn't through like, cannon fire and destruction that we're kind of in a fascist state right now. Instead, it was this slow trudge into not being able to overturn our circumstances, right? And that's not to diminish like the revolutionary efforts we've had along the way. Most recently, say like the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff, but so profusely there has been this like stomping out and exhausting of those efforts. And so it feels like we've just sort of been slowly sliding into, this fascist situation. I feel like this show is a good picture of that. And then if someone can recognize, hey, this is fucked up in this cartoon show I'm watching, maybe they can step out into their own world and start to recognize where that happens here too, right? They start to understand what it means to be a Yurei, and what it means to be disabled and left out of society, right? Like the fact that a major part of this show is about Barry having essentially a disability aid, right? Her Deco eye, and it's getting messed up, and she's making the decision on whether or not to like get it replaced, like that's a real thing that disabled people have to worry about. It also is a commentary on the maintenance and upkeep of software. When do we make the jump from one thing to the next, and do we lose anything significant when we do that? There's so much stuff in this show. It's so good at setting up the pins, right? But it does not knock them down. And so if that is enough to drive you away from the show, then I'm sorry. That's unfortunate. I ask that you give it a try. If you want to see an episode that's, not very, doesn't hide the fact that it's about fake news, and it's through this interesting, fun little adventure where a zoo is featuring an animal that's basically been, rumored and mythologized in a modern way, then you're gonna find that here, right? It's awesome. But sadly, it didn't guys, it didn't pop off at the end. Oh.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's you are waiting for it to pop off, you are waiting for it, and then it just kind of pitters out. It's very anticlimactic, and it's almost thematically inappropriate.
Yeah. Speaking of which, are there any comments on theme that you want to make? Because I've been talking for a long time. I just realized.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's the classic capitalism, especially unregulated capitalism, can really hurt your populace, and you can't just give people money all the time to fix things. Sometimes you have to look at the systemic problems and go cut it out at the beginning at where it starts. Basing your livelihood off of money will make life inherently unequal, mm-hmm. and the people with more money can continue to make it unequal, while the people with less money have to work harder to try and fix it. So don't do that. Ghosts are real. That's another one.
Yeah. So much good stuff in this show. I think that I take to it especially well because I like the themes in it, and I feel like I identify with them very thoroughly. Particularly the aesthetic stuff is what caught me right away, because it was pretty recent after I had read through that Benjamin Walter piece, and it's like, oh my god, it's the thing, which is exciting. But it's interesting that we have a show that's about an aesthetic that we find enjoyable, but that's also part of a problem because it's being used to essentially paint over issues in society, right? Here's your glasses, put them on, now you see fun colors that you can customize, and don't look at the homeless people who are beyond your virtual stickers and things, that whole aspect of like classist society, and also how it intersects with disability, right? Is, I feel, very novel to be having in anime. The hyperverse stuff is not something we've talked about a lot, but again, I like how it's implemented in the show. The fact that we have this, like, it's definitely not making any kind of like metaverse commentary or anything like that, but it does raise questions like throughout the show of like just how in control of the hyperverse are people, the fact that Finn can sort of control and customize it, like, that Barry and her classmates can kind of jump in and have this fun little like fake detective space that they've made for themselves. Like that is like a can of worms, right, that we can look into. Jesus Christ, the customer center being a police investigation agency, how they're using like liberal language to hide the purpose of what the thing is. Holy shit, that's super relevant, right?
It's super good.
Yeah. And all that too, if you don't care about any of this, you still have like the meaning of family, the private and public can coexist. You have at the end, everyone manifests as Phantom Zero, right? And then, in that sense, it's like, wow, look, whatever, I'm rambling. I appreciate that this show is delivering, like, these plural truths about society. Lowercase t truth.
Lowercase.
And I guess I do appreciate they let you form your own opinions. I only wish that this show had the time to let that all actually land, and the base of interest of fans to take what wasn't covered and run with it. Ah, yeah. Any other...
Yurei Deco is good.
It's good.
Go watch it.
Watch it.
Go watch it. You might not enjoy it, but it's worth the
Everybody,
watch. You got any...
Let's call to action time. We're doing the thing. Everybody, let's get Yurei Deco from 5,903 user reviews on my anime list to 5,910 user anime review list. Let's do it.
Yeah! The entire familiar territory base is gonna go on there, which is like maybe 2
We're gonna be so fucking proud of you all for this. Just letting you know.
You got any fucking hypotheticals?
I do. And they're not fun. No, I'm kidding.
I don't have a hypothetical, but there's something Yurei Decadence. Something's there. There's a joke somewhere in there. I'm too tired to think of it.
So hey, let's say that Yurei Deco got a sequel movie, 1.5 hours long, and you get to decide the content of the movie. What do you spend it on?
Okay. It would be about Hack's backstory, right? We could focus a little bit more on it, like the first 20, like 15 minutes, up-styled, no dialogue Hack background, right? And then it would cut to the future where Hack is older, having worked as the leader of Tom Sawyer, and while it's objectively a better place than it was, it still kind of sucks, and it's a political thriller of how Hack has to utilize her position to make the system better, but also, while that's happening, a group of motherfuckers are trying to also usurp Hack's position, and so how do you go from creating a Band-Aid fix to an actual fix?
I like that. Question: would the people trying to usurp Hack, would any of them be the original characters from the show, or would they be a new cast of characters?
No, they'd be a new cast of characters, and they'd be kind of like fun, bumbling, like. I would almost want them to be like caricatures of like capitalists, because I wouldn't want to change the tone of the show, where it gets real serious and dark. But I could imagine like, oh, we want to make our own hyperverse, and we're gonna call it the Cyberverse, and the Cyberverse is going to be so much better. You can get all this stuff for free if you pay us a subscription model. Here's what, and when you can also pay only $2 to open up a box of random stuff, and it'd just be like really silly, like video gamey capitalism, but they're using it for like real shit.
Yeah, I could see, like, let's say they're taking people and paying them extremely low wages to make hyperverse content, because then like they treat it as like a low skill job. Yeah, that would be very interesting. I also would have wanted to see like basically an aftermath, right? As much as I think there's interesting things about the cast that have gone unsaid so far, if we had the chance for more stuff, I would like it to move forward rather than backward. Yes. Although I think we're both kind of wrong. The real answer was that it should be Watson for an hour and a half.
Oh, well, Watson would be in it, and he would kill it.
Okay. Holy shit. If there's one person who would do it, it would be Watson.
Watson would kill a man so quickly.
Okay, and then finally, to put sort of our money where our mouth is, or our love where our mouth is, let's say that Joe gives you the keys to the city. What would you do differently?
So, I wouldn't fucking become a reclusive asshole and just change things without talking to anyone. Yeah. Like, come on, Hack. I would probably, it's one of those things because you couldn't just tell everyone in Tom Sawyer that they're free to do whatever they want, because these people have been completely placated by like the AR stuff. I would probably, if I was like part of the Yurei Detective Club, I'd probably put together a little bit of a like committee, and then I would try and expand that committee to make little cells of like representative democracy stuff, and then slowly break down those walls until there's no longer a need for representative democracy. Kind of go from like a social democracy to like a true blue like anarchist state. It would take a long time though, and in this world, those same capitalists that are making loot box would show up, and I wouldn't know how to deal with them.
That's okay, because we'll make you another movie for that.
Yeah,
I like it. I think it
what
would be.
You do? Oh, I would also make everybody. When you put on your deco, there'd be like when you would start booting the boot up process, there'd be a picture of me smiling. Except sometimes I'm looking really angry. There's no real reason why I'm looking really angry, but I don't tell anybody that. So why is he angry at me?
Paranoia. If there's one thing I think I kind of wish I don't know if I'd say I wish we had more of, but I guess I really appreciated in the show like just like the amount of stuff that they focus on in analog work, like especially looking at Finn's community, that we're dealing with people who are just working with real stuff, right? Like just like, hey, here's our, here's how we handle our daily lives of like laundry and construction and working in our direct environment. I would like to see them given the chance to sort of lead society back into creating art in a physical way as opposed to just digital. Not that I think that like there's a supremacy of physical art over digital art, or that there's an aura in art that can't be captured in digital. But I do think it would be a great way to allow the Yurei, the impoverished, disabled, etc., to be able to sort of take some charge in society, and then also to give a solidarity effort to allow for things like oral traditions to pass and fun stuff like that.
Yeah. I like that. You have any final closing thoughts?
No,
on your...
I think that's it. It feels weird because after all this time that we've sort of spent stewing on this show, you thinking about stew?
Yeah, okay, that fucking delicious stew.
But yeah, it's done. We finally did it.
What's next on the docket?
Well, I think we'll probably review the first half of Mobile Suit Gundam: The Witch from Mercury.
That's exactly right, because we only have about a month until part 2 comes out, and I really want to talk about the possibilities of what's going to happen. I want to point to the stands in this next review and just get everything right, but we can't do that if the new series comes out. Yep. So we'll probably do that relatively soon, but be on the lookout. If you want to listen to Brantley and I talk more about shit, you can follow us on Twitch, where we play video games. The next game we're going to be playing is Hero Hour Contract 2 by Steve O'Gorman. You can follow me on Twitter if you want any updates on that stuff, or you don't need to do any of that, because we are not your dads.